Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 2 of the Visible Thread GovCon TrailBlazers series, Mastering Data Management Best Practices for GovCon. My name is Allison Ritz, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Visible Thread. Today, we are joined by Shelly Sandell and Natasha Adams of WickedPoint. They've spent their careers dedicated to multiple aspects of the proposal process, SharePoint consulting, automation, bid operations processes, and more. So today we're going to focus on how to manage data in a way that's efficient, accessible, and referenceable so it can be easily leveraged during the proposal lifecycle. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Shelly and Natasha, and we will get started.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much to Visible Thread for having us here today. And thank you to everyone for joining us as we talk about content management, particularly with SharePoint and how it can help you and help AI. I am Shelly Sandell, and my business partner, Natasha Adams, is also on the call, and we are WickedPoint. This is our quick intro slide. Not going to spend much time on this other than to let you all know that we have dedicated most of our careers to GovCon work, and particularly in bids and proposals. We have run large proposal centers. We have done every job within proposal centers. And so our background process-wise is really about government contracting and proposals in particular, although we do help a lot with, we have been working with SharePoint for over 20 years now. I know that really dates us, but we've been working with it since 2004. And we're happy to talk to you today. It's become one of our great passions because it is so powerful in our work. So we're very happy to be here today to talk about that. I am actually going to go off camera now so that you all don't see me reading my notes and you can focus on the slides. But we are here, and we should have plenty of time at the end of the session for questions. And I'm assuming everyone can hear me. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why content management is important and the various Office 365 tools that folks are using to manage documentation. However, most of our time we are going to focus on best practices in SharePoint. You'll see that how content management is so incredibly important for quality AI output. I'll wrap up with a few other considerations, and again, we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. Content management is the process of creating, organizing, storing, and maintaining digital content in a way that makes it easy to access, manage, and share information. While an effective system requires both financial and labor investment, the return on that investment can be significant. Think about reduced time spent searching for documents, being able to easily identify and leverage existing high-quality content, the retention of organizational knowledge, even when key personnel leave or change roles. Having scalability to accommodate growth without losing control over your documentation and content. Making it easy for even new employees to locate needed information and for teams to develop quality content faster. All of which leads to lower costs in content creation and proposal development. When we talk about AI, effective content management becomes even more essential. I lost a slide. Okay, so the slide that was here originally was a quote from Fergal McGovern from Visible Thread that came out in the newsletter last week that said, organizations serious about driving value from AI or Gen AI must bite the bullet on proper information architecture. At a minimum, this requires clean folder structures, consistent file naming conventions, scrubbing draft documents, and up-to-date tagging. And so we've all heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. And so that's what he's talking about. Well-managed content ensures that AI is fed with accurate, up-to-date, and relevant information, and that minimizes your risks. Consistency in data structure and language enables AI to recognize patterns and better generate reliable outcomes. Organized content allows AI models to train more efficiently and to handle large volumes of data without compromising performance or accuracy. As we look at content management solutions, Microsoft's offerings are the most common tools that we see folks using, and for good reason. If an organization has Office 365, then comprehensive functionality is readily available without additional investment. However, what we are seeing is that organizations are not necessarily using the right applications for the right functions, especially content management. Many folks are using Teams for proposal development and storage. Teams is a collaboration tool and lacks the robust functionality for comprehensive corporate level content management. And there's no visibility across Teams if you are not a member. Some organizations are using OneDrive, which is also not intended for this type of usage and introduces additional risks. Again, there is no visibility if content exists unless it is shared with you. Become an issue if the owner of that content leaves. SharePoint, however, and I say this almost perfect because it is Microsoft. So let's talk about SharePoint. SharePoint provides extensive content management functionality such as metadata tagging, customized file structures that can be tailored for specific projects or proposals, specialized repositories such as lists and libraries that allow for organized, easy to navigate collections of content. A personal game changer for me in my proposal careers after I was introduced to SharePoint was the configuration control I finally had available to me and my team. Versioning history in SharePoint allows us to see any previous version of a file and revert to an earlier copy when needed. In addition, SharePoint has advanced search tools powered by metadata and content indexing, making finding information faster and more reliable, even when you have vast amounts of data. Users can access documents and collaborate in real time, regardless of their location, and SharePoint seamlessly integrates with tools like Teams, Microsoft Office, OneDrive, and Outlook. And very important for government contractors, SharePoint offers extensive security options down to the most granular level and helps meet regulatory requirements by providing detailed audit logs and retention policies. SharePoint integrates with Power Automate. Some of you may have heard of Microsoft Flow. This allows the automation of workflows for things like document approvals, notifications, tasks, assignments, things like that. Whether you're managing thousands of documents across multiple proposals, contracts, or projects, SharePoint can scale to meet your needs without compromising performance. It can also enforce governance requirements through retention labels and policies and automated archiving. For anyone working against strict project timelines and workflows, SharePoint offers task and project tracking. With integrated lists and calendars, you can manage milestones, assign responsibilities, track deliverables, and even sync with Microsoft Project. As already mentioned, all this functionality is included with Office 365. And finally, with increasing adoption of remote work, SharePoint enables mobile and offline access. And let's jump into it. As I mentioned earlier, we see a lot of organizations using the wrong tools for content management. We do see organizations that are using SharePoint, but we frequently find that they are failing to leverage most of the functionality that SharePoint offers. And this image perfectly represents what we find. Drawing on our 20 years of lessons learned, I'm going to walk through our top 10 best practices for leveraging system functionality. We have a lot more we can talk about than the 10 we're showing here, but with the time available to us today, we really want to focus on what we think is the most impactful for users and those that are really critical for effective AI, which are the 5 highlighted items here. Number 1, single point of entry. We have found that providing users a central dashboard, a single point of entry to all content, eliminates the hunting and searching for old emails, random bookmark links, etc. It also helps new users jump in quickly. All users don't require access to all items. You can have various components separately secured, which we'll talk about later, but everyone has the same launch point every time. Along with the single point of entry, clear and consistent navigation is essential because it directly impacts the user experience and overall effectiveness. More users should be able to easily find what they are looking for because they are more likely to engage with the content. If users cannot find what they need quickly, they are often more likely to bounce and not use the system. Another trend we are seeing with organizations that are actually using SharePoint is that many of them are only creating a single document library to manage all of their content, offer specialized repositories for different types of documents and information. Using the correct repository for respective content can provide additional features and functionality and will also help AI better understand the data. And what you're seeing here is not a comprehensive list of all repository types that SharePoint offers, but these are kind of the quick hits on the things that are most frequently used. For example, picture libraries are designed specifically to manage images. As you can see here, we can easily view thumbnails and image-specific metadata, which we're also going to talk about in a few minutes. Number 4, limit folder structures. This is a new and highly debated concept with a lot of folks we work with. We're all used to creating our folders on our servers, on our OneDrive, on our laptops, on our computers, and that's how we organize our content, and we've been doing that for decades. SharePoint, there are significant benefits for getting away from folders, particularly deeply nested folders, and I'm going to walk you through some of this. For starters, subfolders hide files. So if you have deeply nested folders, you're clicking, looking for things, a lot of things can be hidden and difficult to find. You can accidentally have multiple copies of the same file in different folders, which creates confusion and impacts configuration control because folks may be updating the wrong version of a file if there's more than one copy of it. Obviously, with nested folders, you have to click in and out, and if you have a lot of folders, you are doing a lot of clicking. Too many nested folders will prohibit content from being loaded because every subfolder is included in the file URL, and that is restricted to around 260 characters. So if you are 5 folders deep and you have a long file name, you may not be able to load that file correctly or update that file easily. If files are moved to a different folder and someone has shared a link to that document, the link will no longer work. And if you are trying to do cleanup and reorganize or restructure, if you have deeply nested folders, it becomes a challenge. And we really liked this piece of clip art that we found on the data management timeline. It talks about how you create the first temp folder, and then the temp folder gets a subfolder. Now you got 30 subfolders. And so this is basically what we are encountering. I'm showing you here a case study from a large government contractor that we worked with. This is about how bad it can get. This client brought us in to assess their implementation for proposals. And they brought us in because the system was despised by most of the users. The structure was driven by a desire to copy documents to new folders for every stage of the proposal. As you can see, dozens of libraries contain repeating folder structures. Where you see the red circles here, that indicates 9 separate locations where response documents can be stored. This obviously created mass confusion on where the latest versions of files were and where authors needed to go next. Nobody challenged, when this was built, nobody challenged the approach because it was based on their legacy folder structure that they were using on a server. The users here were continuously struggling to locate their files. We made a lot of recommendations, but for purposes of this presentation, we ultimately implemented a new folder structure, a new structure for the site that allowed for only one location for proposal response files and eliminated copying and moving documents to improve configuration control. As you can see, much fewer places for things to be, and everybody always knew where the latest version of their documents were located. Now, all of that said, if you are baby stepping into SharePoint for the first time, I've got about 20 of you on the call. If all of you are using SharePoint, this may be irrelevant, but if you are looking at moving to SharePoint and you're going to have some adoption issues, repeating your existing folder structure, whatever that may be, if it's on a server in OneDrive, it may make sense to replicate that within SharePoint. It's a valid approach and not a bad first step to ease users into the environment. You can slowly, over time, introduce them to some of the functionality that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Naming conventions, also really important for feeding AI. When Natasha and I saw this image, we responded to it immediately because we've all been there. We've all seen the emails where we've been emailed a file that has so many descriptors about what version it is and things like that. With SharePoint, you don't need any of that because of the configuration and control and version history. So you can rely on really good naming conventions to help you manage your data. When collaborating, standard file names reduce confusion and streamline the process across different users and teams. Standardized naming ensures that files are sorted logically and allow users to quickly find files. When team members work together, consistent file naming ensures clarity and reduces the risk of miscommunication. Good conventions can help organizations meet compliance requirements and make it easier to categorize, store, and manage files systematically. Think about your ISO. You can prevent file duplication by making it easier to recognize existing documents and avoid redundant file creation. And proper naming conventions ensure that files remain understandable and accessible over time to users who were not even involved when they were originally created. And again, they help AI learn. Metadata. This is the 400-pound gorilla when it comes to SharePoint. Metadata, the graphic here is you can see the bottle is the data, and then metadata are information about what's in this bottle. This is also we're gonna talk here a little bit about metadata, and this is how we get away from all those folders. And I'll have some illustrations on that here in a few minutes as well. SharePoint metadata is also referred to as tags, fields, or columns. So if you hear someone refer to columns in SharePoint or fields or tagging, we're talking about metadata. Instead of relying on folder hierarchies, metadata provides a flexible way to categorize and group documents. You can improve the search accuracy, you can better organize your data, allow for more efficient filtering and sorting, you can enhance collaboration and accommodate growth with a scalable content management approach. Metadata enables users and AI to filter and sort a large volume of content by varying criteria without manually sifting through folders and files, making it easier for teams to work together by ensuring that everyone can quickly find what they need. As the volume of content grows, metadata makes it easier to manage and retrieve documents without the complexity of maintaining traditional folder structures. And let's look at an example of that. Imagine you're trying to organize documents about hundreds of dog breeds. Using a standard folder structure, you could organize this a bunch of different ways, but one approach might be to organize that information like this, using nested folders to group first by class, then by size, and then by coat. So if I'm looking for a file on Belgian sheepdogs, I need to know it's classified as a large herding breed with long hair. If I know these things, no problem. However, if I don't know any of that information, I'm doing a lot of clicking in and out of folders. Now, if we add metadata to these files, the need for folders can be entirely eliminated. Looking at the column headings, you can see we've added metadata and removed the folders. This, by the way, is a screen capture of the exact same library. We just created a new view, eliminated the folders from the view, and we added the metadata. This view groups the documents by one of the metadata fields, which is dog size. You could create views that grouped by any of the metadata here. The class or group of breed is displayed as the first column, and their coat is another column. The other columns contain additional metadata relevant to dog breeds. We can now get to our Belgian sheepdog a variety of ways. For any power users, as you can see, visual indicators are an elegant option to represent data and can also improve the user experience. Now, if we translate this to government proposal content, relevant data might look more like this. You determine the metadata that makes sense for your organization and for your content. As you can see here for proposals, we've got things like the opportunity ID, the year, the date it was due, the customer, the practice area. Was it a recompete? Were we the prime? Were we teaming? What was the value? Did we have a work site for it, and we can access it directly from here? Again, whatever makes sense to you, those are your metadata fields. In this instance, if I'm frequently looking for bids by customer, I can click on the customer heading and sort filter on the customer, so I can view all proposals by a specific customer. Taking metadata a step further, once you have your content tagged, you have all of those columns, all those fields, you can create different views of that data so that users don't need to repeatedly sort and filter in the same way every time if they are looking for a particular type of content the same way over and over. You can establish views that have that content already filtered, grouped, and sorted in a particular way. For example, here you see the same content presented in several ways. The first view here is just any bid with the stage active. So active planning, active development, and active pending awards. So these are live deals. We walk along these tabs, we have by stage. So this is all proposals by stage. So we can look at proposals we've won, we can look at proposals we've lost. We want to look at proposals by year, we can look at proposals by year. We want to look at them by client, we can look at them by client. The important thing to note here is even though we've got these pre-configured views with sorting and filtering and grouping applied, we can still use the column headings that we're including in this view to do additional sorting and filtering. So for example, say I want to see everything by a particular client, but only things we've lost. I can now filter to just show me the deals we've lost for Battle Group Omega. And yes, for those of you that are Star Trek fans, all of our dummy data here is from the Star Trek universe. Another tip or trick that we have found to be extremely helpful with user adoption, this isn't so much for AI, although if you have things like naming standards documented and processes documented, it can still contribute to quality AI processing. However, on-page help and instructions, and this is a major lesson learned. We have found that obvious procedural guidance helps significantly with user adoption and promotes correct system usage. Thanks to the design flexibility that SharePoint accommodates, this can be done a wide variety of ways. Here is an example of instructions just provided directly on the page. If you have more complex instructions, another approach might be a pop-up like this. Or if you have detailed guidance, such as a system quick reference card like shown here, a prominent link to the document is helpful for users to reference. And this allows the users to open this file in another tab if they want to reference it online, or if they want to download and print it and have it on their desk to reference as they're working within the system. This just gives the user options, especially if there's a large amount of content. One of the items that we often include as a pop-up is all the Boolean terminology that you can use in SharePoint when you have to rely on search. Our goal with metadata is that you don't have to rely on search. We optimally think you should be able to find content within 3 clicks, but sometimes you find an obscure term that's in an RFP or a contract and you want to find where else that is. You can crawl the content in your repositories, you can crawl the content across your site, and there is extensive terminology you can use to really refine your searches. And we have a handout, and we included in our systems that we build that includes all of that terminology. If anybody would be interested in that handout, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information will be at the end. This is another big SharePoint. This is, again, not so much for AI, but when you're using SharePoint, this is another trouble area that we are seeing with a lot of our clients, is not leveraging role-based security. And role-based security is how to control who can do what in the system based on their job or responsibilities. As shown in this illustration, instead of giving everyone the same access, users are grouped into roles. You can see that on the left side of the screen here. Each role has specific permissions, which means people only in certain roles can access certain parts of the system, as shown on the right. Your legend is down here on the bottom showing the permissions. With an approach like this, which is the more efficient approach to security, file sharing in SharePoint should be disallowed. Especially in the GovCon world, Natasha and I are violent advocates for the disallowing of sharing of data, sharing of files. And some of the reasons are here. Allowing users to share content introduces ad hoc permissions that bypass access settings, and users can potentially grant access to individuals who are outside the intended roles or permissions. This can lead to accidental data exposure and compromise confidential information. It's much easier to manage permissions with this approach in the long term. For compliance and auditing purposes, role-based security ensures that all access is logged and reviewed, making it possible to demonstrate adherence to relevant compliance standards. It also prevents permission sprawl, which is more users than intended being able to access the content. And finally, it will help prevent potential data breaches and ensure that only authorized users have access to specific content, maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of your information. And so that is a conversation. If you all are not using role-based security now, that's a conversation obviously with your IT group. But we do see a lot of organizations that are just dropping people into folders and into repositories, and there's no way to audit who has access to what. And then we've seen a couple organizations who do allow sharing, and documents are randomly being sent to clients who don't have access to the system because folks don't understand how that works. And it can get crazy. So there is a time and a place for that kind of collaboration, and government contracts for it. Another best practice, and this is incredibly important for AI. As you step into content management, having named content owners, curators is incredibly important. Clearly defined ownership ensures that someone is responsible for the accuracy, relevance, and timeliness of content, all critical for AI, and users know who to call. When content owners maintain uniformity in structure, quality, and updates, content remains current and useful as informational processes evolve. Organizations can enforce quality standards, ensuring that content meets predefined criteria. Having a point person also helps in managing and coordinating related content across different departments or teams, reducing duplication and gaps. Also, curators can tag and categorize content in a way that makes it easier for users to locate the information they need. Okay, other considerations. Outside of our top 10, there are other things that we want to talk about for a minute that either improve content management and/or improve the user experience. We talked a little bit about search. SharePoint has an immensely powerful search tool that can be configured to be really incredible. You can filter, you can search on metadata, you can search on content, you can search on language, and it's just really profoundly powerful. And we really recommend you investing the time to configure search properly. Use audience targeting where appropriate. This is a great function of SharePoint to further provide access or let people see what they should be seeing. Co-authoring. So this is another 400-pound gorilla. Everybody kind of got excited with the new version of SharePoint and how everybody can go in and work on the same documents at the same time. That's what co-authoring is, when you've got multiple people entering a document, making edits and making changes. Co-authoring is wonderful. However, it comes with risks. Files crash, data gets lost, certain users' changes don't get saved. And when it comes to configuration control, when you have 3 people in a file co-authoring, he or she who exits the file last gets the version. So while co-authoring is really wonderful, there's a time and a place for it. And we've worked with organizations closely to walk through their processes and the size and complexity of their documents to determine co-authoring processes, when to allow it and when not to allow it. If you have a 500-page document with 60 graphics in it, You do not want 25 people in there editing it at the same time, because it is going to go corrupt. It is Microsoft, it has its limitations. So within SharePoint, you can lock documents so that folks can only edit documents if they check them out. You can force checkout, and then only one person can be in the document at a time, which is very stable and provides absolute configuration control. But in the modern day and age, that's not always feasible. So we really recommend having a long conversation with your team about when and how to leverage co-authoring, because we have a couple organizations that have reached out to us because they have lost so much time in the cycle because of corrupted files, because they were co-authoring when they really shouldn't have been. Look at your versioning settings. By default, SharePoint has versioning turned on, but you really want to have a conversation about how many versions you want to retain. You want to spend time instructing your users how to access the version history. And in particular, if they are creating new versions of files, if they're entering version comments when they save a new version to the site, because when you go into version history, you will see the comments that are related just to the version. And if you have hundreds of versions, those comments can really help you filter down to the version that you're looking for. So say someone opens the file and updates the org chart and then closes it and saves it. When asked about the version comment, you can say new org chart added. And then that someone's coming back to say, oh, when did that new org chart go in? It's the wrong org chart. I know right which version to view. Or restore the previous version with the correct org chart. One of the nice things about versioning, not everyone understands this. Every time you create a new version of the document, you have the numbered history. If you restore a file, so say I have versions 1 through 8, and I need to make 5 the current version, if I say restore it, it will become version number, the latest version, version number 9. 5 will still be sitting there, and I will not have overwritten what the last version was. So you'll have a new version, but everything is sustained. So whatever was the previous version becomes the next oldest version, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm not confusing everybody. Content ratings. These can help you measure quality. Again, these are highly subjective, but if you have libraries for past performance or boilerplate content, baseline narrative, this is the type of feature that you can have folks, the little stars like you do on the website, rate the content, and if it's something that they're using frequently or is written well or various other reasons. If you allow content ratings, it can provide you additional insight into the quality of your content, but just keep in mind, it is very, very subjective. This is another something kind of silly, but it has been the source of so much user frustration when we've gone in to talk to organizations using SharePoint, and it's such a quick fix. So by default, if you open a Microsoft Office document in SharePoint, it will open in the browser version of the application, which has less functionality than your desktop version that most folks that are doing substantial amounts of document development are using. You want to use your desktop Word, not the browser version of Word. Within each repository, there's an option to turn on open files in the client application. And once you trigger that setting, anytime anyone clicks on a Word file or a PowerPoint file or an Excel file, it will open in the desktop version, the client version of that application. And we have found this to be massively appeasing for the masses because that seems to be such a source of contention, and it is such a quick fix. Clearly communicating what is where. This tends to be one of our top feedback to clients that we go in and talk to. If you are using Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, you have files on the server that are restricted for price or capture, you have other software systems that you've invested in to help you with your data, make sure users know what is supposed to be where, because that is a leading source of confusion and user dissatisfaction. And it's not hard to do. Implementing feedback cycles. We consider this important in almost any process. With feedback and improvement cycles, you can invest your users in improving the system. And you can do a feedback form right within SharePoint, have it right on your landing page, feedback, suggestion box, whatever you want to call it. But we have found we've gotten really wonderful suggestions for improvement from folks that are during user adoption. things that we weren't even aware of, even though we do surveys and we try to get everybody's use case. Sometimes we just overlook something, or they find that, oh, hey, by the way, since SharePoint can do this, can it do this? And more often than not, the answer is yes. So we find the feedback and improvement cycles are also important for user satisfaction and growing your system. Last but not least, enforced processes. All of this is great in theory if everybody's following and playing by the same rule book. And so, I mean, I don't know how many of you, how far you go back in your careers, but again, I used to get 100 emails with the same document. Everybody had a different version. Everybody had a different file name, and they would just email me. I don't want to log in. It's too tough to log in. I can't find my password. Lots of reasons why they couldn't use the system. The system isn't going to work unless everybody is using it and using it correctly. So it takes some education and some enforcement. And we really encourage folks to hold the line and enforce the processes that you're implementing. Otherwise, they will not be effective. Now, I just blew through a lot of different content really, really quickly. But we've got lots of time here for questions if there's anything anyone wants to talk about more.
Shelley, thank you so much. It was an excellent presentation, super detailed, and I think really effective the way that you broke down what a proper folder structure looks like. So we do have a few questions in the chat. And to everyone, if you have a question, you can go ahead and pop it in the chat and we'll open up discussion and then, continue with a few things on our end as well. So Paul Cray asked, given that most of the folks on the call are using SharePoint or have used SharePoint, what could they do to assess if you're using the structure in a most efficient manner right now? So what do they do to begin to assess, their SharePoint systems for how efficient it's going to be?
Well, one of our favorite tools is to send out a survey. SurveyMonkey, SharePoint has a survey tool built into it as well, is send out a survey to your users. And you need to make sure you ask the questions in a way that the answers are measurable, but find out where folks are spending their time. So are they spending time looking for files? Are they spending time, what is it they're spending their time doing? And so, like I said, we really like to survey folks before and after an implementation to find out what's working and what's not.
If I can jump in.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Well, there are really quite a few considerations that you need to take into account, even when you're developing a survey, to just understand what questions you're going to ask. So first of all, you need to consider different types of users that are accessing your content. What is important for them, how they are approaching information. So we see organizations, for example, organizing their proposal archives by year, right? But what if you want to look at everything you submitted to a certain client? Can you find that? Or if you have several offerings and you want to see what you submitted for this particular offering, you want to see all the clients and all the years. So can you distill the information in that manner? On top of that, you want to see where your organization is going. Are you growing? Are you acquiring companies? How adding those and their content going to affect your structure? Is it flexible enough to accommodate all different aspects that are coming your way in the future? So many aspects to look at, many users to engage in different roles to see where you are now and where you want to be.
Thank you. So would you say that from a survey perspective, really kind of breaking down to current behavior? So what are people looking for now, and what does that workflow look like to identify the things that are most important to address?
Absolutely. What's important for them, you want to know, right? What are their main pain points right now? What are they struggling with? And it might be as minimal as lack of training, lack of exposure to what the new features are. We've done surveys, people identify things they're struggling with, but there was training existing already on this specific thing. So it may be just as minimal as that.
Okay. No, that's wonderful. So I'm going to follow that up with Paul's second question, because this speaks to different situations and different structures. So what are your suggestions when we're talking about accessing information and situations with prime and sub relationships? So we go beyond our initial relationships, but then into the relationships between prime contractors and subcontractors. How are you categorizing that data, and how do you make it most referenceable?
So I have to assume that this question is more in relation on security and how to allow access for outside users. So I'm going to answer it from that assumption.
Okay.
There are different approaches, and again, it all depends on your IT group, how they define corporate-wide policies, what they allow access to. We saw very strict access rules, and we saw not so much. And then there are depending on that, your architecture of your solution in SharePoint will look different. For example, we have a client, the solution that was most optimal for them was to have a separate site for each organization, doesn't matter if they're prime or a sub. They would have access just to that site, and when that site, they would work on certain documents for one proposal or multiple proposal or whatever projects they were collaborating on. And then the links to those were provided to the proposal center team and the internal team. So content wasn't duplicated. Proposal team could see all their files and then links to the files that their sub was working on. So they could access everything kind of from one entry point, but still allowing that separation, that proper security in terms of managing access.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So another question in the chat was around metadata and tagging. So how do we establish the metadata and tag the text, and how are those views created?
Right. So I assume, again, the text is not really the text, it's the files that we're tagging. The text gets indexed, so the search will crawl through content of your files and the text itself. But here we're talking about items to the level of files. So metadata for specific files or files types can be determined through talking to your group and identifying, again, what is important to you, how are you looking at information now, what are you tracking? Let's say you have some kind of proposal track or even your CRM or your pipeline management tool. What are they tracking there? What's important for your team? And then again, looking at different roles. And if I'm an executive, I want to come and see what's currently in the shop, what you're working on, and what the issues are, right? If I'm a solution architect, I want to come in and see, okay, what did we submit on this specific solution within the last 5 years? If I am a client executive, I want to see what is submitted for my client and what is we're working on for this current client. So very different aspect, and all of that can be captured in metadata. And that will allow you to create those views that will give people the access to the subset of that metadata that's important to them. And I think, yeah, Shelley's comment here. So Shelley, go ahead and jump in.
Oh no, you're doing a great job. I was just showing an example of some of the metadata for opportunities that we're showing here. And you can see everything from the due date to the customer. You can see at the top of the page in the screenshot, there's 3 different tabs. So we actually have a lot of metadata. We have so much metadata that we don't show it all in a single view. We bucket it by relevant materials. So the summary might be the date it was released, the date it was due, who the proposal manager is, who the client is, the practice solution, things like that. Submission details, maybe what are we bidding, who's the capture manager, who's the pricer, who are our teaming partners, things like that. Opportunity details, again, the things. Now, some of this metadata, this is the other point we want to make here, is you don't want to duplicate effort. As Natasha mentioned, if you have a good CRM tool, if you're using a Salesforce, or there's about 50 tools we've heard of now, if you're using a true CRM tool to manage your pipeline, we don't really recommend duplicating data. However, if you've got a proposal shop that needs to be able to find content quickly, having a few of those fields duplicated requires almost no effort and provides you such value over time to go back year over year and look across clients, look across solutions, things like that.
And another aspect.
And if you want to,
Go ahead.
And I just want to say, feel free to reach out to us too if you need more ideas on this. We're happy to talk to you offline if we don't quite address what you're asking here. But go ahead, Natasha.
Another aspect of creating those columns and metadata. So let's say you decided you want to make sure you track customers, right? And you are working with a federal government. You're going to be entering your Army, Department of Defense, or different aspect, kind of different categories of subdivision and such. It's very important that you predefine the list of those customers. So every time you select that entry for each specific proposal, it's entered the same exact way. Because if you have U.S. Army written multiple ways, U.S.Army or U.S. Army and so forth, that filtering and sorting will be compromised. So you want to make sure that those entries are predefined and it's easy to just go and select your customers, your solution. There are quite a few things that will be predefined, and you can manage them and add to them as that grows.
That's a great point, Natasha. In fact, we last month we had a client, a global company, and one of their fields was country, and they gave us thousands of records to migrate into metadata like this, and we encountered 9 different ways that the United States of America was documented, from USA to US to United States of America, 9 different spellings for USA. And so if you were trying to filter on everything in this country, you had to select 9 different boxes if you found them all. So that's a great point. And you can see in the green bar here on the top of the screen where it says manage field values, you see response types, practice solutions, customers, companies. Those are the lookup lists that Natasha's talking about that feed these fields so that you're picking from a finite list and there's only one spelling.
Excellent. So touched a bit throughout the conversation today that, this is really top of mind for folks right now because of the adoption of AI platforms and the adoption of AI solutions. So want to understand or talk, or if you could speak to, the reality of what happens if your data is not effectively managed. So, you adopt an AI solution, you want to use it to, pull in information to reference for proposals, and, help with that manual process that everyone struggles with now. So being able to find the things and find the material that's going to be, most relevant to a current effort. So if your data is not properly referenced, tagged, how does that impact the results?
Well, to begin with, it won't guarantee that your data is current and up to date. This organization and tagging, first of all, and most of all, is important for keeping your content accurate. Because if you give AI an inaccurate set of data, that's what you're going to be relying on, like Shelley said, garbage in, garbage out, right? So first and foremost, you're organizing it to make sure it's solid and that AI has correct inputs.
And AI will learn. So we'll learn. So if you've got metadata showing the deals that you won versus the one you lost, AI will learn to prioritize content from the deals you want, right? There are things you can educate. We're not AI experts by any stretch, but those are the types of things. All this tagging helps AI learn what you're looking for.
And then they of course serve as parameters. So if you tell AI, I want to look at the deal where we primed for this customer in this set of years, then they have data points or like those indicators to grab from. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to be able to find the accurate data.
And the same is true for contract write-ups, executive summary, depending on what you're generating using AI. And if you set up your baseline libraries with your reusable content correctly, your everything, past performance, resumes, corporate data, baseline documentation, technical narrative management approaches, all that stuff that we're used to as government contractors. You can really help AI mine that data much faster and more efficiently and more accurately.
Excellent. And to expand on that, we have a question in the chat. So, given that most of the current SharePoint data within an organization is likely stored without metadata, what is your suggestion to start adding that metadata to current files when you're starting that transition?
So the good news is you can add metadata at any given point. So once you get your repository created and you're happily moving along with SharePoint, you can modify as you go. So you can add metadata to those repositories, those libraries. And if you have nested folder structures, you can do what we did there with dogs. We added the metadata and then we created new views that eliminated the folders. We didn't have to go in and extract every document from all of those folders. So you can add metadata, and our recommendation would be to baby step into a couple fields at a time. I lost my train of thought. Natasha, help me out.
Well, but if you're creating views, obviously you've used using metadata as a criteria. So, for example, you're grouping by customer. If you're not enforcing that field to be required field, you will not get proper grouping, right? So you need to make sure that some fields that are very important for you that you're using further, they need to be required fields. So things like that.
So talking about kind of the path to organization. So you showed a couple examples from a specific customer you worked with, and then just the idea of how you get there from using, legacy structures, tagging, duplicating files, and then you're in this position where you need to start organizing. So where do companies start? How can you start kind of taking this in bite-sized pieces, and, what is the solution?
More and more, we're seeing that organizations want to kind of start from scratch and not really try to take on going through years and years of data, because as they are discovering, some of the data is not relevant and hasn't been curated properly. So they want to kind of clean slates. And that's ideal scenario when you just build your new structure with all the metadata. And let's say a new proposal is launched and you're developing in that content. If we're talking about just organizing what you already created, your archive, your legacy proposals, then again, take baby steps. Take the last year, right? Everything that's been done in the previous year can be gradually migrated, and you can sort and see what's there. There's a lot of files that are not needed. You don't need to keep everything. So determining some governance rules and approach to how you're going to migrate data, what you're going to keep, what the file naming conventions need to be, because you might have to rename certain things to make more sense to users. And again, do touch points with your users who will be looking at the data on a daily basis, and make sure they are comfortable with this, make sure it makes sense to them, it's intuitive to them. And going back to Paul's earlier question, how to organize data and make sure it's most sufficient. Look at it from the perspective of the new hire. If you bring a new hire into your system, how easy it is for them with minimal training to find what they need. That's usually your best kind of indicator.
Am I able to share another slide from another deck?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you all seeing?
We may not see it on the main. No, we can't see it on the main screen.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's not going to allow me. So 2 years ago in Orlando, APMP's annual conference, BPC in Orlando, we did a session called I Hate SharePoint, and we had a chart as part of that deck that showed a sample migration approach. And so for whoever answered that question, if you want to reach out to us after, we're happy to send you that chart or talk to you more about it as well. Okay. And I'm going to put our contact information up for folks while we're answering questions in case anybody wants to reach out for additional information.
Excellent. Now we jump back down.
There it is. Whoops. Whoops.
Up one more. Yep. There you go. Perfect. So we'll do kind of one last question, and then if anybody has anything else, make sure to pop it in the Q&A box. So generally, I know that you say that A lot of folks like to start from scratch or kind of start with the content that is most current. Overall, with the clients that you work with, what is the main challenge that folks are facing? So what are you seeing kind of across the board as when they come to you, you have disorganized situation, what are the kind of biggest pain points that you're seeing throughout kind of that are most universal?
They can't find anything. They can't find anything. They've used, we've got another client now that we're working with. They were literally using one SharePoint library to store 20 years worth of proposals. And in that same library, they had a folder for their templates. They had a folder for their past performance. They had a folder for their graphics. And they were nesting by, I think it was by client and then by year, or by year, then by client. And so nobody could find anything. And then we didn't really talk about this today, but SharePoint out of the box has a lot of noise on the page. If you just launch a fresh SharePoint site, there is all kinds of helpful nonsense on the page that is very distracting to users. One of the other things that we do, and we didn't get into this today because it's really about the user experience, is we clean up a lot of that noise, and then things like that, so it's less distracting. And then when you have the right repositories and the navigation and the entry point, and folks can start looking, I can look by year, or I can look by client, or I can, user satisfaction goes right up. But right now, the number one reason people are coming to us is because it's unusable. They can find nothing. And a lot of their folks, because they can't find anything, are opting to work outside of the system. So they're bouncing, like we talked about in the beginning. Yeah. They're refusing to use the system because they can't find anything.
Yeah. And the other thing that I noticed that some organizations, they understand that things are not working and they want to change things, and they got leadership support, which is a wonderful first step. But then when we start asking them questions, they don't really have clarity on how to organize, right? What they really want. So that's why surveys, that's why working, with maybe sometimes third parties and even us to help to get to that, what it needs to be, right? What we really want, what will work, and validate. You always need to validate with users. Will it work? Is that the right solution? Is that the right approach? But also reserve the right to get smarter, right? Because we always recommend, like Shelley said, a survey 6 months down the road to see if the solution actually gave you what you needed, gave your users what they're looking for, and adjust. SharePoint is so flexible. It can, you can change things on the fly and adjust. And if you have that feedback cycle and suggestion box, you'll be amazed how quickly people get engaged, especially when they see that their suggestions are being implemented and that the system is improving. Then everybody becomes an owner and they start loving it.
Excellent. Well, we are just about at time, and just note that I will connect you after Paul added his contact information to get a copy of that slide and connect with you after. So I'll make sure that you have his contact information.
Wonderful.
And to everybody else, WickedPoint's contact information is here on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to them directly. And of course, at Visible Thread, we'll continue to keep you all updated and keep the conversation going around this topic, because we know how crucial it is. As the more and more folks are adopting AI solutions, the more this will be top of mind. So we will continue on that as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and make sure to come back next week. So September 26th, 11 a.m., same time. We will be joined by Kyle Peterson, our VP of Account Strategy and Customer Success, talking about avoiding inefficiencies in the process. Like we said in the beginning, you will receive a copy of the slides, which will also include the contact information for Shelley and Natasha, and a copy of the recording to your email after. So again, thank you everyone.
And the copy, sorry to interrupt, the copy of the slides, the Fergal quote got dropped. I don't know if somebody thought it was an error because it was a visible thread slide in the middle of our deck, but can we make sure that goes back in? Because it's a great quote about content management for AI, and it's visible thread.
Absolutely. We'll add that back in, and we'll add a link to everyone from the where that came from. So Fergal's resource and his post where that came from. So make sure everybody gets that content as well. So again, Shelley and Natasha, thank you so much for joining us. This was a fabulous session, and thank you to everybody on the line. And make sure to, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.